The way I went off on those AOL chat rooms at 15 pretending I was 25.
I mean, the stories I heard in reporting this book, so I interviewed more than 100 folks under 30. Every single person, I think, had some kind of experience that made my jaw drop.
Guys, we are here with journalist and author Carter Sherman. So excited to have you. Your book, The Second Coming, Sex and the Next Generation's Fight Over Its Future, is the book I didn't wish we needed, but boy, do we need it, huh? So you're a journalist.
Yes.
And you've been on these topics of your book for quite some time. We are going backwards, which is what an interesting thing. Did you see that coming?
I feel like, so I've covered sex and its byproducts, as I like to call it, for, I guess, almost 8 years now. And I feel like the thing I've noticed the most is that it's all cyclical. Is that anytime you think that we've moved past an issue or that something is no longer relevant, cut to 2 years later, I'm covering the same thing yet again. So it's not a huge surprise.
It's like fashion, you know? It all comes back again.
Yes, I'm wearing bell bottoms as we speak. This is quite some time, and we're really in need of people documenting it. But I've noticed too, because I'm up with the news because Corinne's mayoral run. I was with the news anyway, but now I'm like kind of watching it with a deeper eye, and the fear-mongering that happens in the news is so, like, the human psyche is very delicate and we're so susceptible to fear, and fear is how you control people. But I was shocked to learn not that long ago that, like, the Republican Party used to be pro-choice. And there's like a Christian right-wing thing that came in and...
Yeah, sort of. I mean, when Roe was first decided in 1973, there wasn't such a clear division between Republicans and Democrats on abortion rights. Like, there were people in each party that had different opinions on the issue. And it really became much more important to be opposed to abortion to Republicans over time as the religious right became more powerful in U.S. life. And then actually we had anti-abortion Democrats in Congress, and we still have very few, but we had more of them up until the fight over the ACA. And it was under Cecile Richard, who recently passed away, the former head of Planned Parenthood, that she really made it a requirement for Democrats to be supportive of abortion rights.
Okay.
And so it's only really been, even in like the last 5 to 10 years, that we've seen an increasing separation between the parties on this issue.
So what inspired you to write this book?
Well, there were a couple of different moments in covering abortion rights, reproductive rights, LGBTQ plus rights, sexual assault, that I sort of started to think, like, all of this stuff is connected and we should really be talking about how this is impacting young people more. But I think the real moment that I decided that there was a bigger book to be done here was actually, I think it was, so Ruth Bader Ginsburg,
Love her.
died in 2020. At that time, it was... as the months passed from that point, it was sort of becoming clear that Texas was going to be banning abortion past 6 weeks. The Supreme Court was taking up a case that could overturn Roe v. Wade. And I was talking to a friend about it, and she was saying that ever since Ruth Bader Ginsburg had died, she was actually struggling to have an orgasm because she just kept on thinking about Brett Kavanaugh's voice at his confirmation hearing.
What a true feminist.
Yeah, so it was just like this voice kept on coming into her head during sex.
No,
and,
Brett, don't take away her orgasm. Damn.
I mean, I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on. Like that, there's no way, or I hope there's no way that Brett Kavanaugh's voice is turning you on at these moments. I mean,
he's such a dweeb.
Who can say? It's kind of nasally when he talks.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I started thinking about, like, well, how is this stuff impacting people's sex lives? Like, are they thinking about it?
Right.
And I started working on a story. At the time I worked for Vice News, and I started working on a story where I was asking people exactly this. And it turned out that a lot of people didn't really think about how the overturning of Roe was going to be impacting their sex lives. Oftentimes in the North, people didn't even believe that it could. And then, Roe was overturned, and I started hearing from a lot more people that it was affecting them and that they didn't feel like they could do what they wanted, who they wanted, that their politics was infiltrating the bedroom in a way that they had never really thought about before.
Yeah, and good sex has a lot to do with feeling free.
Yeah.
And when you don't have the freedom over your body because of the consequences that could come up from sex, I completely understand that.
Well, and it was already, I mean, there was a lot of reports already that Gen Z was having less sex than millennials. I mean, I'm guessing just being a little bit more online and less in the real world is part of that. But can you speak to why you think Gen Z is having less sex?
I think there's a lot of reasons why this is happening. And I actually should say that millennials also started having less sex than previous generations.
Damn.
Yeah. So it's been a long decline. Like I grew up in the age where I feel like I was hearing all the time that people were having like impersonal, casual hookup culture going on all the time. But that wasn't actually all that accurate. There was fewer people.
A big talk.
Yes, as it turns out. They say that people who talk the most about sex are the people who aren't having it.
I was thinking, oh, that's weird for this podcast. But I was like,
of course, present company excluded.
Having a lot of casual sexual encounters in my 20s. I mean,
it's easy to do in New York.
Casual meaning like, you know, people that I work with, like, you know, comedian people. But I mean, I also have a very unorthodox jobs where I have access to a bunch of people I kind of know.
Yeah. Also, the comedy community
which makes for casual sex.
The comedy community is kind of like theater in high school. Everyone's very horny.
I can see that.
You know,
for you guys.
and we're very attracted to like if you can make me laugh kind of thing, and that happens a lot. So.
Lots of, I imagine, like dark stages.
Yeah,
you know.
Oh, yeah. But also porn.
Also, porn is a factor in this. I mean, so what the thinking is that like basically fewer people in high school started having sex. So there's a survey that the CDC does every year, or every 2 years, where they ask people.
They used to do. I don't know if they're going to do it anymore.
I mean, this is one of the resources that has vanished since Trump took over. But so they asked people in high school, like, have you had sex? And so millennials, it was fewer than 50% of millennials, like when I was in high school, had sex. And now it's something around like 30% of Gen Z people have had sex in high school.
Wow.
So it's dropped a lot.
I will say high school sex, thumbs down. You know, it's
I
not,
mean.
But at the same time, like the fact that urge is not there for them, that's sad. That's sad.
No, maybe it's on reading though.
Oh, that would be great.
That would be
I
wasn't thinking about having. I'm very sexual, but I was not thinking about having sex in high school. There was no one
really,
no one who interested me.
I grew up in a house of trauma, so I was like, how can I escape this?
I was thinking of having sex with like Tim Curry in the Frankenfooter outfit, not anyone I went to Union High School with. You know,
I'll go on the record and say high schoolers not hot.
Yeah, I was having aspirational fantasies.
Yeah, I mean, I was like obsessed with losing my virginity.
Really,
I was.
Oh my God, I really wanted to lose my virginity. Why were you
obsessed with it?
Because I feel like there was like all of this talk of hookup culture, and I was like, everyone's having sex without me. What is going on?
Yes, it's a little FOMO.
Yeah,
I remember the day I had sex was the day I got my braces off when I was 15 or 16, and my best friend saw me. I got dropped off, and she goes, "Did you have sex?" And I was like, oh, "Yeah," like she could tell because we were so obsessed with it. Like it was such a huge part of. But I also think too, I am thankful every day that I escaped high school without social media. I could not imagine what hellhole that would have been for me had online bullying been a factor.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is one of the reasons that people think that sex has gone down in high school is people are spending so much of their time on social media. And we do know that since 2010, when you start seeing the proliferation of social media, of phones, of screens, young people's mental health issues have gone up.
Yeah.
And so all of this sort of feeds in together, creating a space where it seems like fewer people are having sex.
Did you dig into sex education?
Quite a bit.
Okay,
yes.
because that's a very interesting. I realize now as I get older, and especially working on Corinne's campaign, and we talk about what public education, school education could give a student, like how in an ideal world it would prepare a young person to have these skill sets and also have confidence and discernment, frankly, and critical thinking. But I think like public education is how you can control a population, and keeping information from people. You can kind of keep them in a state of fear or just being unsure about something.
Yeah, or create an environment where people feel like they can't go to anybody for help when something goes wrong or when they want to know if something is normal. And so that leads people, I think, oftentimes to go to the internet instead.
Yeah.
And the internet doesn't always have the best interests of young people at heart.
Especially, when people's media literacy is poor, quite frankly, and they don't know how to decide if something is real information or fake information. Even intelligent people will sometimes send me things and I'm like, this is fake, and this is why this is fake. they don't know how to look for those signs.
And we're adults who've spent many years on social media. And so think about 14 to 18-year-olds.
Absolutely.
I mean, the way I went off on those AOL chat rooms at 15, pretending I was 25 to I thought I was talking to a grown man, but who fucking knows? But I could only imagine the trouble I would get into had I known how to access pornography.
Yeah. I mean, the stories I heard in reporting this book, so I interviewed more than 100 folks under 30. Most of them were under 25 about their experiences. And every single person, I think, had some kind of experience that made my jaw drop. Or made
Can
me
you
laugh
give us
out
some
loud.
highlights of the ones that really stuck with you?
Yeah, there was one woman who, I think, if I'm recalling correctly, she's 19 or was 19 when we spoke.
Right.
And one of the questions I'd like to ask people is what was one of the first things to turn you on? How did you sort of get introduced to the idea of sex that made you feel sex in your body? And she brought up Urban Dictionary. And what she would do, I know,
wow.
This was my reaction. What she would do is she would look up very sexual words, sex, cum, all kinds of stuff on Urban Dictionary. And the thing about Urban Dictionary, as I found out through interviewing her, is that they have smutty vignettes under these words. So you can find erotica on Urban Dictionary. Yes. And so she was like, I do not know why I was doing that, but that was a thing that I was doing. And that was how she got her fix of porn light almost.
Wow.
I'm what's the vignette for cum on Urban Dictionary? I use Urban Dictionary a lot. How did I miss these vignettes?
I didn't.
Well, you probably don't need to look up what cum is.
I didn't look up what cum
I knew
is.
what that was.
But I mean, a lot of times, especially as you get older, you're I'm not sure I know what that means, or I want to make sure I'm using this correctly.
This is true. Yes.
So I do look things up on Urban Dictionary a lot.
The cum one, she told me specifically, felt really overwhelming to her. Sounds like...
Wait, okay, all right, yep, you're correct. So cum, white substance that is used when you are having fun with someone or multiple people. And then it goes to, her mouth reached his rock-hard 8-inch cock. She licked his cock from head to base and then took it all in deep throating until she could barely breathe. Kyle had never felt anything so good in his entire... Oh my God, look how long this is. Look how long that is.
You can see how people get
Kyle?
the wrong ideas about sex from the internet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I always take in Urban Dictionary with a bit of a comic edge. I'm I think they're trying to be funny. I didn't think it was it's going to give me the definition so I can use the word, but also it's going to make me laugh.
Yeah.
I mean, it is funny.
It is funny.
And I think
I'm whoever writes this is hilarious.
Yeah. I would love to know who writes this.
I would
who
too.
spends their time.
Because do guys read erotica? I know that seems to be more of a female forward platform.
It seems to be. I talked to a lot of young women and queer folks who really got into erotica, got into romance novels, got into fan fiction, and that was really how they got interested in sex. Yeah, they felt seen in that form of media much more so than in traditional pornography.
Yeah, and too, one of the fun parts to me about sex is using your imagination. Right. And that's why I like kinky things or sex parties or something that's a little oh, this is a little, makes me nervous. Did you notice a stark difference between the boys and the girls that you interviewed? Did you interview guys?
I did interview guys. I think there were so many differences. It would be hard to catalog them all. The guys I found... It was really interesting, I think, the guys who wanted to speak with me, because I think many of them had never really talked about sex before.
Yeah.
I think the young women oftentimes had, they'd had these conversations with their friends. Sure. And these young men had, I think, never articulated it to somebody else aloud, much less not articulated it to a woman. And so I think they felt oftentimes this was a safer space than they had ever been exposed to before, which I felt very grateful for. A lot of young men talked to me about their body image issues.
Really?
Yeah. And I found that to be really heartening, because I think we oftentimes stereotype that as something that young women are going through. But yeah, I mean, social media does not make young men feel good about their bodies either, it turns out.
Wow. It affects men and women equally.
Men suffer too, as it turns out.
Yes. I know.
This was news to me. Yeah.
Now, for the straight men, were there conversations a lot about pornography and how it had affected them and growing up?
Yeah. So this was one of the things that surprised me the most, actually, is I worked for many years at Vice News, and Vice News, I think, was a very supportive of pornography environment. Like I interviewed a lot of sex workers and
kink in general. I mean, Vice News is how I learned about feederism, because there was like, they used to like the Vice docs, and I was like, these are quite informative.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the things we really prided ourselves on, is being very open sexually to what folks to teaching people about sex. And so I sort of went into this thinking like, oh, people are going to feel like neutral to positive about porn.
Sure.
But it turns out that a lot of young men feel really negatively about porn. Like they consume it, but they feel like it was really bad for them.
Right, because I think they get a minor addiction to it, or they become like unsatisfied in their real life sexual experiences because of it. I mean, almost everyone I've dated has mentioned at one time or another that they thought porn negatively affected their life.
Yeah.
Men. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it's safer like to just jerk off to a person that doesn't exist.
Well, there's no vulnerability in that way.
Yes. And that I think is fucking with men pretty badly.
Yeah.
And then when women date them, if they're straight, it's like, why can't we connect here?
Like, why are you dissociating? Why am I dissociating?
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting porn. There's not a lot of conclusive science on it. Like, we don't actually know for sure if it can be addictive. We don't know that it is necessarily bad for relationships. Like, I went through so many different studies that found porn can stimulate desire in relationships.
Sure.
Or porn can
Watching porn
eradicate
together,
it. Yeah.
But so often, though, straight couples, the guy just kind of puts his sexual energy into jerking off a lot of the time. Like after a certain amount of years, we've found, because we get emails from people all, about their relationship issues, and the porn affecting the sex life and the guy not being able to get it up during sex is a very common issue.
Yeah, well, this is also one of the sort of theories behind young people having less sex, behind the sex recession is porn replacing multiple partners actually having sex with one another.
Yeah. What's the right way to look at sex, in your opinion?
I wish I knew. I wrote the book in an attempt to find out. I mean, in my mind, I think like what I want for people is to be able to have the kind of sex that they want amongst consenting partners, and to have resources to go to if something does go wrong.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm not really here to tell other people how to have sex. Like, I'm sure how I conduct my sex life is not like gonna be the best guidelines for other folks.
Sure.
And I feel like right now we're really in a moment where there's more and more constraints on sex, and particularly on young people's sex lives.
Yeah. Yeah. How have you had experiences in your sex life that have made you that were scarring?
I mean, I have survived sexual assault. I think, unfortunately, a really common experience. And I talk about this in the book, being sexually assaulted. And then also I ended up filing for a separate instance. I was sexually harassed, and I filed a Title IX complaint.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice.
Well, the complaint didn't go anywhere, which also very common. Yeah. And so like that was also, I think, an impetus for writing this book, is trying to figure out exactly like what are the processes that people can go through, young people can go through when something goes wrong. And like, have we set up institutions that can help them? Particularly like for Title IX, this is a process people can go through in K through 12 schools and colleges. And like, those are institutions that teach people how to be. And like, can you trust authority? Are there adults in the room who can help you? And so when Title IX fails people, as it so often does, it sets people up to believe that sexual assault isn't going to be taken seriously by institutions.
Yeah, which is something, that's a really the thing we have to fix. Could I ask you about the Title IX filing and the nature of this? Like, what was this person doing to you? Like, and over how much time?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a multiple instance scenario. Basically what it was is I had a professor, and in class, we were talking about how to find a mentor in journalism. It was some kind of like basic discussion. Yeah. And frankly, I had just had a big fight with my boyfriend the night before, so I was like not participating really.
Yeah.
And I raised some point about finding a mentor, and he said, Carter, the way you can find a mentor is by wearing a short black skirt. And this was like in front of the entire class. And I just felt very...
In front of the whole... Oh
and it was like 8 a.m. too. And I was like, it is too early for this.
Dude.
Never a good time. I know, never a good time. But like, wait till I've had my coffee.
Did the class react? Did you feel that? That's fucked.
Yeah, there was... I remember there being a bit of a chill in the room. And then he like could detect that this had gone over poorly. And then he laughed and said, oh, that's just my little joke. And then I was like, I'm sick. And I left.
Wow.
And I didn't actually remember at that time or even know that Title IX was a thing. So this was when I was a sophomore in college.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was a senior that I mentioned this experience to administrator at the school, and he said, you can go to Title IX.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
So you were led there. Isn't that what we interviewed Daisy, who has since taken her life, but she was helped co-found an organization called Safe Bay. She was raped, and the way she was treated by her town was awful. And I think she utilized Title IX. Her and her friends.
Yeah, I don't remember that interview so long ago, but most likely.
Yeah.
I talked to folks from Safe Bay for this book, actually.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Sexual assault is, and I wish colleges were having more real life discussions about sexual assault and like what it means. What does enthusiastic consent mean? Like, you don't have to say, "May I touch you?" Like, you can, like, how to read body language and how to tell if somebody's liking it, because so often, like, women will write to us, specifically in college age, and just like a lot of times they'll wake up to a man on them. And that is very, very alarming. And it seems like there's just a chunk of men, guys out there that have no care to how the woman is feeling during the interaction whatsoever.
I mean, I really feel like there is so much space for colleges, not just colleges, like K through 12 schools to be talking to people about this. Like, I also interviewed young women who had been sexually assaulted or said they'd been sexually assaulted in K through 12 schools. And it's, those are oftentimes when the norms around sex are set and when the, I think, entitlement can set in for men that they should be given sex by women, that it's their due. And so I really wish that there was so much more discussion of this kind of stuff when people are younger, before they go off to college and are not necessarily in communities that feel safe to them.
Did you only interview American people for this?
Yeah, I tried to focus on
it's very
what
special,
I know.
America.
Yeah.
Well, for sure. Because
sure
I was
are.
going to say, like, the K through 12, like, there are countries that do have a much broader sex education that starts in, kindergarten, which I know, obviously half the country here would have a real big problem with that.
But also, I would, like, when I was a child, I know every child, like, finds their own sexuality at their own individual age, but it's very common for a child to, like, have sexual urges at a young age and not understand what they mean, and then do something like masturbate and go, "I don't know what this is." That's what I did when I was very young. So I kind of had urges from the get that I was, and you just, if no one's talking about them, you just feel shame. But the culture at large, though, I think I do a bit about this on stage, that we cater to a man's sexual preferences. Like, we're great at sexualizing a woman for a man. And so I think that contributes to the entitlement that men feel of, like, well, these movies and these billboards are all catering to my sexual needs. So they're getting an inflated sense of importance over what they want. Do you have thoughts on that?
I mean, one of the things I talked a lot with young people about was sending nudes. And, like, I am not opposed to sending nudes. If people want to do it consensually, more power to you.
Right.
But young men oftentimes very much mistreated young women who sent them nudes, pressured them into it, or disseminated that content without their consent. And I think this is sort of what you're talking about, where it's like it becomes dehumanizing over time, because you just don't think that these people are entitled to, have control over their own image, over privacy.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of times a guy, has shown me a nude of somebody else's and I go, "Did she tell you that you could show this to everybody?" I'm like, I don't really want to see a picture that, as curious as I am, it's not like I'm not curious. Of course, I'm curious. I want to see everyone nude, Me
too.
But
as long as they're okay with me seeing them.
That's always my first question. I go,
consensually nude.
Did she say this is, open for public consumption? Because I'm doubting that she did. And I think it's something that people they're not even really thinking about that. It's not like they are going around with, a vicious attitude being like, "I'm going to show this to everyone." They kind of just really didn't think a step further.
What do they say when you ask this question?
They're like, they just kind of like, "Oh, that never really thinking about that never really dawned upon me before." I would say is the most common thing, because I know they're not doing it, and most times they're showing it to me because it's in like a positive way, like, "Oh, look how good this person." It's not to make fun of them or anything, and I go, I hear you, but I'm just she doesn't know me. I'm just some stranger. Why, like, what? Or I'm like, are you also I also question, like, are you using this as a way to, kind of the way
Street
a guy
cred.
would put on porn to try and get you horny without you having consented to even start any kind of
that's
sexual
happened. Yeah.
relationship with
Or
them.
to like show off their own prowess. Like, look what I was able to do. I got this woman naked. There was this guy I interviewed who from the Northeast, I think it was 18, 19, he was in college now. But he was talking about how when he was in high school, someone showed him his friend showed him his collection of nudes, the friend's collection of nudes. And the guy I interviewed said, like, they kind of see these as a kind of trophy. Like these nudes are a kind of trophy. And then I was reading this study of focus groups of young men in Australia, and they said the exact same thing. They said that, like, oh, they're kind of like a trophy.
Yeah.
It's like, that is wild to me that across the planet, people raised on opposite sides of the globe, these young men have the exact same attitude about nudes.
And
Well,
how do you
like, how does everyone in the room think about nudes that they receive from men? I don't think of them as trophies. I think of it more as like this fun, like, private art collection that I have, I would say.
Oh,
or something like that.
I was in a relationship.
But I don't show them to people.
Yeah. Although to be fair, because I could be honest about this, there was a comic that I had slept with that's hot. Like everybody kind of agrees, like, yeah, that guy's really hot. And I've talked about the nudes that he sent me. I didn't show anybody because that would be weird. But I didn't send or receive nudes until my early 30s after I got out of a 7-year relationship. But I like nudes that are personalized. So if you're like jerking off, I want you to say my name. Otherwise,
write my name on your chest.
Exactly. Otherwise, that could be for Sarah, and how would I know? I like special nudes.
I mean, I would imagine, if you get a good nude of yourself, you use it multiple times because you're like, this is great lighting. I looked good that day. Let's reuse it here.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love taking it. What is your take on, like, the nudes? Have you received nudes from guys that?
Well, I'm married, and I've been with the same person for a very long time.
Oh, okay.
And yet still, sometimes people have sent me nudes without my consent, and I'm like, I don't even want this. Thank you, though.
A dick, and you don't even know the person, let alone are attracted to them. You're like, this is like sending me a picture of a Starbucks cup. It means absolutely nothing to me.
Well, I think because I work, like, covering sex, people just, like, assume that this is something that I'm looking for. And, like, being a female journalist, people send you all, being a woman in public, I'm sure you guys deal with this too.
Yeah.
Where, like, people send you all kinds of things and you're just like,
male comics
I do
will
not
just
know you.
start talking about their problems in the bedroom to us, like, totally unprompted. And I'm like, okay, all right, I
I'm
guess.
not your therapist.
Yeah.
If you want to pay me like one, we can talk about that.
Yes,
but
we could be OnlyFans for therapists. Yeah, like, that's my service.
Yeah, well, I think to that point, people after shows or because we do this show will come up and, kind of assume that because we talk about sex, we want to somehow participate in some, non-traditional sex format with them. That's the one that really, like, it just makes my skin crawl. I just really don't, I don't
non-traditional sex format.
Yeah,
what is?
like like orgies and things like that, or just because I have a sex show, I automatically want to have a threesome with you. I mean, like, that, no.
I have discernment still.
100%. No, I don't even like being hit on, to be quite honest. It makes my skin crawl a bit, but I just. It makes me not want to talk about sex anymore, quite frankly. And it's also disheartening because I do find that, we can have conversations about how men lack discernment all the time. But I do feel that women, especially when talking to other women, lack discernment, and also can't keep their hands to themselves. The amount of experiences I've had where, because we're both women, someone thinks that they can touch my body or comment on my body.
That's a weird one.
Especially people who listen to this show, and I'm like, well, it seems like you should know more than other people that you can't do that.
Didn't a listener just grab your tit for a photo?
Correct.
A woman did that to me once. I'm like, no. What?
Multiple times.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
That's so bizarre.
Right. And I'm like, we spend hours and hours and hours on this podcast talking about how, you should seek, help from the authorities if a man touches you without consent, and then women do it to other women. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't
That's also
work
bad.
either.
We can also be part of the problem.
Yeah, 100%.
And we are.
And we are in our own little way.
Yeah.
You went to a pro-life conference first part of your book?
I did. I've been to many.
Tell me
what's that like?
about that.
Yeah. So there's the one I talk about in the book is it was part of something called the National Pro-Life Summit. Are y'all familiar with the March for Life? Do you know what this is? Okay. Yeah, so for those who haven't heard, it is a national anti-abortion gathering. It happens every year on the National Mall. I go almost every year.
Really?
Yes.
How's the turnout?
It's big.
Yeah.
And it's really what's really interesting, I think people don't realize about this, is that it's very young. It's a lot of Christian schools that bus in high schoolers and college students from across the country.
It makes them think they're standing up for something that's empowering.
I mean, these are very zealous young people for sure. And so that's the March for Life. And then the following day, in recent years, there's been this thing called the National Pro-Life Summit. And that is put on by Students for Life of America. It's a very powerful group. They have many different campus groups all across the country. And so I have gone to that for, I think, the last 3 years. And it's very eye-opening because it's just a totally different world than I think most people participate in. It's obviously extremely religious, and it incorporates a view of abortion the abortion issue is part of a larger worldview around sex and marriage and babies.
Yeah.
AKA all of that should happen all at once, all together. Do not have sex before marriage, have sex in order to have babies. And I think that this push to ban abortion is, as I write in the book, very much mixed into this push towards sexual conservatism, which is to make it difficult and dangerous for folks to have sex that is unmarried, that is recreational, or that is queer.
So keep a fear mentality around sex so that I can control what you do.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that they do really powerfully at this conference is talk about like how the young people who are gathered there, who are saving sex for marriage or are opposed to abortion, that they are like martyrs almost, that they are being attacked by a broader culture that is opposed to their entire way of life, that is opposed to their God.
Yeah.
And it's really, really well organized, well articulated over and over throughout the day. And a few years ago, actually, I also went to the Women's March conference to cover that. So this was like, I don't know, whenever the year after the Women's March happened. And I think this was probably the first and only year that this conference happened. And that conference was, I think it was really motivating for attendees, but it was really scattered. It was not one message, and it was a lot of hand-wringing. It was a lot of people feeling really bad about the pussy hat stuff. And I'm not saying people shouldn't feel bad about it, but it just felt like the difference between that conference and the National Pro-Life Conference, which is just like one message over and over and over again, is really striking and really goes to show the right-wing power behind this.
I'm so glad
they're good at organizing.
I'm so glad you're saying this on this show, because I talk about it on my political podcast a lot, and that is a huge problem between the right and the left. The right has one message and they all agree on it. The liberals nitpick each other, and that's why we're in the position that we're in.
And anything scattered you can't get on board with, and making them feel like they're a martyr, that's even more powerful, I would say, than fear. Like, oh, you are doing something important. What you're doing matters. Like, that's why people love sports.
I mean, not now. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But yeah, like Corinne has always said, we went to a Trump rally for the Daily Show, and it was such a great experience. And Corinne kept commenting on how like these people are fun. They're fun. They're all tailgating. They're giving us beers. They're welcoming. And I don't know if at a Democratic conference it would be this fun and welcoming, which is a bummer.
I mean, the ones I've attended have not been that fun and welcoming.
The Democratic conferences?
Well, when I go to like these when I cover these liberal events, it's a lot of times people feeling really bad, and it's just not
about what?
I mean, I think bad about the direction of the country, but also just like feeling bad about like nitpicking, like we didn't do this right, we should have done next right, and it's like the right wing things I've attended, people have just been like full steam ahead. Yeah, let's go.
It's almost like on the left, there's just like it's like overthinking, and I'm like, pick one thing and let's all do it. Just whatever the thing is.
What should the thing be?
We all have an something
Freedom?
that we agree on.
Yeah.
Something that we agree on. I mean, the watching Christian conservatism reemerge with the vigor that it has been interesting. Can you speak to why you think it is having this reemergence? So, why we have a faith leader in a way that we did not, who's speaking in tongues in the White House? Where did this come from, and why are we all on board? I mean, I've read a lot of pieces on why young people are coming back to Christianity, and that they felt lost. But I think there's something larger here.
Well, something that's sort of interesting is that, every generation of Americans tends to be more secular than the one before.
Oh, right.
And that is also true of millennials, it's true of Gen Z. What's interesting about Gen Z, though, is that oftentimes it is, it's more men who are sticking with the religion and remaining in the religion, whereas historically religion tends to be something that more women are interested in. And so I think that in the sort of revival of religiosity or religion's place in U.S. life or religion's power maybe over U.S. life, because I don't necessarily think that more people are religious. I just think that religion's maybe getting a bigger platform.
More people are lost.
Well, there's that. But I think that it is very much intertwined with a rising sense of the importance of masculinity and being a manly man and this sort of thing. I think a lot of people are talking about and thinking about, which is why are young men moving to the right?
Yeah, who's that football player that had that speech at the college that was a woman's
Harrison
role?
Butker.
Yeah, Butker. What a fucking last name that's perfect. Yeah, his speech was really surprising to me because this was a young, handsome, athletic, successful man who I was very surprised to see him focus on a traditional values role for a woman and speaking so much about that.
There was a lot of young hot MAGA. I mean, what that was the
so weird.
That was the cover of what was New York Magazine a couple weeks ago. It was some of the hottest people I've ever seen. That was what it was. It was called the Cruel Kids Table, I believe, and it was just
interesting,
hot big titted people dressed well.
The article did say, though, I think, great article, that it was
it took an hour to I read it out loud on my show, and it was an hour long read.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I think they said in the article that these gatherings were 80% men, 20% women. And so it does seem like there is this very interesting gender divide, gender reorientation going on here.
Yeah,
I mean, men have always been more conservative, but yeah.
Sure.
I also think though, if men are more conservative, when these men end up pairing off, assuming they're heterosexual, that a lot of times they will be able to convince the women to also be religious, because women, I think, are more prone to changing a religion or becoming more religious if it means the reward is getting a mate.
Yeah. I mean, I think oftentimes women are just more willing to change their lives to have a man.
Period. Hard stop. Exactly. For sure. Yeah.
That
Where you live, what you're gonna, what you want to do, if you want to have kids or not have kids. Yeah. We're making big changes.
Yeah, because we think it's so important to be married, to have a man, to have been chosen by a man.
Yeah.
It's so annoying. At these pro-life conferences, was there any references to porn and to what the place that porn should have or should not have in your life?
Yeah, very anti.
And do you think these guys were not looking at porn?
I mean, well, what's interesting is, have y'all heard of the app Covenant Eyes?
No.
Okay, so actually,
I need to download that immediately.
I would not necessarily recommend it.
It's going to track your uterus.
Yeah. It does track you. That's exactly what it does.
Sure it does.
But it's actually House Speaker Mike Johnson has talked about using this, I believe with his son. I could be wrong about that, so maybe fact check me. But what it does is it tracks your phone and what you're looking at your phone to make sure you're not looking at explicit content.
Right.
And so this app has been recommended at the conferences I've been at as a safety check and to make sure that you are not inadvertently looking at porn. I actually had a colleague at The Guardian download Covenant Eyes on his app or on his phone to see what it would do. And he pointed out that it had a tendency to flag things that were not explicit, like female soccer players just wearing a shorter crop top situation. But it did not flag things that were explicitly sexual, like male strippers. And so I think that is probably less indicative of this app is actually really supportive of homosexuality and more a sign that this app is looking to police women's bodies and looking to police what women can do and how they can dress.
I do remember, now that you described that app, I remember hearing about it, and there seemed to be a sense of pride. I don't know if it was from Mike Johnson's end or his son, but I remember that part of it where they're look, my scores, I'm clean. And I'm oh my God. But don't you find it interesting that it's there's these such extreme ends of the spectrum that it feels like most people are pooling towards, where it's safe sex for marriage, safe sex for the purposes of having a baby. And then on the opposite end, it's these people that are just
have 3 boyfriends.
Lead with their and lead with their sexuality, which that's not, for some people that is natural, and I've met people like that, and I'm you do you, boo, you are very sexual and that's your thing. But other people, you feel they're just saying it and doing it do it. And you're like, oh, okay, we don't know how to find our comfort zone in this.
Yeah. I mean, I think most people are really very much in the middle.
Yeah.
But then so much of the messaging we get, particularly from institutions, is on like the conservative side. And it just makes everybody who's not like that far, like anyone who's dared to have sex before marriage, feel really bad and feel like they just can't speak openly, even if their desires are very like middle of
Like
the road
sweet.
average.
Yeah. 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 I don't know what the solution is to that, but I just feel like this conservatism with sex is not, it's so unnatural. And I'm like, ain't no way all those boys at that conference aren't looking at porn. There's just,
Or maybe, I would imagine many of them have had sex. You know, there were a lot of couples at these gatherings. Which was
Really?
I was watching some like couples like pass like love notes amongst one another at one
that's
point,
cute.
and I was like, oh, that's very sweet. Like, you know, these are like normal people. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah,
think oftentimes
sure.
it's easy to demonize folks you don't agree with or don't know very much about. But like, these are
Yeah.
young people who are, I think, just really looking for a path in life and feel
Sure.
very accepted by this movement, in part because the movement is telling them like no one else will accept you.
Well, I mean, that's, and then any conservative group or extremist group whatsoever, like that, I think the biggest pull that a person would have to that group is like finally somebody accepting me and they're cheering me on and they think I'm great and I feel seen and heard, even if it's for not something I don't necessarily have my full heart in.
Yeah.
It just feels good to be seen and heard.
And I think like sexual conservatism, like this idea that you save sex for marriage and then you have kids and all that, you know, it like makes sex simple because it's like, oh, if you wait till marriage, like you will have good sex, you'll have sex with somebody who loves you, you'll have sex the way that God wants you to do it. And it's like sex is really hard and nuanced and complicated.
Yeah.
And like you can't protect yourself from that by waiting for marriage to have sex. You could arguably make sex more complicated for yourself if you only have sex with someone after marriage.
Oh
Sure.
my God.
And but I think people are really drawn into that message because they don't want to deal with how difficult sex can be.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, you know, kind of like, was there any positive messaging or anything you learned at, you know, this summit where you're saying, okay, maybe they have a good idea here. Maybe they're doing something positive.
I mean, I think that it is good for young people to be involved in politics. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that it was very heartening to me to see all these young people be really enthusiastic about their ideas and to believe in like that they could make a change in their community.
Yeah.
Because that was what this conference was really about. Like you guys go home and you take this message back and you go to your state legislatures, you go to protests, et cetera. And so I think that is always something that I find very empowering and positive as a message that like young people can make a difference and they should be told that and they shouldn't just feel like, oh, all I can do is swipe through TikTok every day.
Mm-hmm. Right. I wonder if that also too makes it harder to sway anybody after the fact. If you empower them with this martyrdom of the anti-choice movement, they're going to be so much less likely down the road to change their mind unless they have a personal experience with it.
It is really fascinating. So one thing I did a number of years ago was I went to what was called like a pro-life boot camp in Houston, Texas. And it was like a week-long, I think it was a week-long camp for, again, young people, like college students, to learn how to become like better anti-abortion activists.
And just you're going, they know you're
This is a
reporting?
question everybody asks. Yes,
Okay.
they knew. We had cameras. We filmed it. We turned it into a documentary. You
I was
can
like,
watch
were you
it.
pretending like you're, I was like, because
you look very young,
You could
so you could
pass
totally
for
pass.
a college
Yeah.
shooting because I was like, that would get kind of extremely
this was years ago, so I could probably pass better then. But no,
Yeah.
they knew exactly who we
Okay.
were. It was actually very funny because so the comms person was, I think, really excited for us to come. And then we got there and I think she was like, oh, like I could lose my job if this goes south. And so they started recording us on their phones whenever we would talk to them or interview them, which is fine. Like I don't have a problem with you recording me. If I'm recording you, you can record me.
Yeah.
But they like would do it so sneakily, like they'd slide their phone across the table. And I'm like, you guys can just,
Oh my God.
you guys can just tell me that you're
know
doing
you're
it.
recording
It's
me.
fine. Like I don't have a problem with this.
You're a journalist. You get it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I've always been like, I've always wanted to go back to those young people like years later and be like, hey, like, is this still something you believe in? Do you feel like you were being told the whole truth? And what's interesting too, actually, about that is, so there was one young woman at that at the pro-life boot camp who, I can't remember exactly. I think this was in 2019 that I went to this because it was pre-pandemic. And then like 2 years later, Texas banned abortion past 6 weeks. And I actually ran into this young woman again because I was back in Texas reporting on the ban and its impact. And she was going door to door talking to people about the ban and how like oh, by the way, as a heads up, like you can sue if you suspect that someone has broken this ban and assisted in an abortion past 6 weeks. So I ran into her there, we talked. And then a few years after that, I ran into her actually at the National Pro-Life Summit. And we talked again. She was just like more and more in it. And like the last time I saw her, she was like married and pregnant.
I wonder how her sex life is.
I mean, she is a very lovely person. Good. Yeah, I mean, I hope it's good. I hope everybody is having like sex that makes them feel good. Yeah. But it was just fascinating because it's like, oh, you can live your entire life in that world.
Yeah.
And I would love to know, 10 years from now.
Have you interviewed couples that have that were married and waited for sex?
I didn't really do that for this book, actually. Okay. I'm trying to remember if I've ever done that. I did marry people who were waiting for sex, or who were waiting to have sex once they were married.
Okay.
And I talked to people who like are deep in this kind of world, and I talked to people who didn't necessarily like wait for marriage, but had really strong beliefs about wanting to wait for the right person, the right moment.
Yeah, which is, I think that's a positive message too. I think like being intentional with sex can be lovely for a lot of people. Because I'm like, there has to be some good things about this pro-life movement. I have a lot of rage towards people who are pro-life. Or anti-choice rather, because it's just, you cannot convince me otherwise that it's nothing but controlling what a woman can do with her life. And then, the best way to keep a woman down is to force her to have a baby she doesn't want to have, in every way, economically, just spiritually. But I imagine like it must feel good to have a handle on your sexuality and feel like there's barriers and you're just not spilling everywhere. But I don't even know, like, are they celebrating sex, married sex?
Yeah, oftentimes actually like white evangelical churches in particular, like there's a rich tradition of like how to have the best sex with your husband.
Really?
Oh yeah, going back decades.
Are they good tips?
I mean, I can't say I've read very many of them.
Okay.
But like one of them I think very famously was like wrap yourself in saran wrap and greet him at the door. Like they're very pro having sex with your husband.
Pretty kinky, yeah.
Yeah, because like part of the sell, right, is like if you wait to have sex with your husband, it's going to be the best sex you could ever possibly have.
I mean, I think I learned that when I was a kid, when I heard Jessica Simpson's dad talk about, he was kind of like talking about her losing her virginity as if he was almost like excited for her. This is when MTV was had
those rings. That was also like
the promise rings.
Promise rings. They're still out there.
Tons of people still wear promise rings. I have a
that's fucked.
I have a good
get out of my sex life,
amount
Dad.
of like people from different worlds, and one of my friends is really, really, really Christian, and his partner wears a promise ring.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that we're past the moment though where like pop stars wore it, or like the Jonas Bros
for sure
wore it, or Selena Gomez, and I don't feel like we see that much these days. Maybe it's like pop culture is so splintered, I just don't know about it.
Well, I also think it's interesting that like there was a point especially in the 90s and the early 2000s where celebrities would be so revealing, females, so revealing with their clothes, and it's like, are you going to show me your cervix next? Like, what is the next step up from this outfit? Like, it is literally showing me your gaping asshole. But then you see now with like Billie Eilish and these other women, and Renee Rapp. I saw Renee Rapp in concert. I'm like, who is she? Was so sexy but she was wearing these baggy clothes.
Well, this is like Gen Z androgyny.
Yeah, but I love that because it's feel comfortable. Like, oh, we don't have to wear the tightest jeans that show our clit basically through the jeans because they're so tight. Like it's interesting to witness the pendulum continue to swing.
Or just having, because I do think that there are young like pop stars who do wear not very much these days, but it's like having that spectrum.
Yeah.
I've talked about this with a lot of my friends where it's like, what would it have been like to have all of these different options for famous women when I was growing up?
Because and you pick the one you relate to the most.
Yeah.
Like when I was in middle school, we were dancing to My Neck, My Back in middle school. And I was like screaming the words, grinding with boys.
I truly did not understand that song until many years after it came out. And then I was suddenly like, I'm sorry, what was this about? It's like a light bulb moment.
I'm over here screaming, lick my pussy and my crack in 8th grade.
What do you think the crack was?
Butt crack.
So you knew, you understood it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it is
a butt crack.
But I wasn't like, I was too young to want anybody's mouth on my vagina. Like I didn't want that, but I wanted the attention, like the intention from men. I think I got such a high off of. from a very young age. And and too, when you're a young woman and you start to like your body starts to, feel more womanly and look more womanly, the way older men treat you is very interesting because then you go, wait, I don't know what exactly I have that's so powerful to you, but it is intoxicating to feel like you have power over a grown man when you're a teenager.
There was a young woman I interviewed for the book who started developing early on, and there's actually a lot of research into what early puberty does for young women. And how it can make you more at risk for things like sexual assault and sexual violations. And it's also sort of interesting because like early puberty is becoming more and more common.
It is, yeah.
But there was this young woman who started developing very early, and her mom immediately started being like, okay, you can't wear leggings to the mall. Like you have to be like sort of afraid of men. And I think that instilled a shame in her around like her own body because like there's nothing you can do to control that.
Yeah.
And she did end up dealing with a lot of instances of sexual assault. She dealt with instances where she formed like relationships with men or presumably men online and like sent them nudes of her body, and then those nudes were disseminated.
Oh, boy.
And so it like can really, when you make people feel like like attention from men is the best, most important thing ever, or like the scariest thing ever, but like ultimately just centering it so much and making it seem so important, it can really set people off on a trajectory in life that makes them feel powerless. And
because of conversations like that, and I think we've all gotten especially if you went to like a public school where you're not wearing a uniform, almost every girl I know has been told like that's too short or that's too short. It's just like from a very young age we're told it's our responsibility that boys can't control themselves.
Yeah, and this is, I think it's replicated a lot in like sexual assault training, sexual violence prevention, where it's like, oh, it's all on these women to protect themselves, and it's not on people to not sexually assault you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you still hear echoes of that today, and it just sends me through the roof. I also think, too, I was thinking about, I watched a documentary not that long ago about LSD and how one of the reasons why the government was cracking down on this was because it was making people not want to sign up for the military because they were like, I don't want to be fighting. Like, this drug is making me understand that we should live in peace and harmony, and to a government to the American government, that's very dangerous and very risky.
Wasn't the government also dosing people with LSD at one point?
Okay. They were. Yeah. Yes, they were. But I also think like, as an American society, we are obsessed with and hate at the same time a woman who's sexually free. And that is just very, I don't know, it's nerve-wracking because we're constantly dealing with people's impression of us or men's impression of us as a woman. And I feel like it's just exhausting.
Well, because like men hold so much power in society, and so their impression of you does matter about how far you're going to get in life, unfortunately.
Yeah. Have you ever interviewed a guy that made your blood boil with his backwards views, and how did you handle that?
No, actually not really, honestly. Like not for this book and not in my life as a journalist, not because like there haven't been times when I've disagreed with somebody, but just because I feel like through the act of interviewing, I oftentimes just come to have more empathy for that person, period. Like I see them as individuals because like we're having this conversation, and just oftentimes like even interacting with somebody like proves that they're just a person to me. And so...
And you're not born an asshole. An asshole is created.
Well, I very rarely walk away from an interview being like, oh, like, fuck that guy.
Oh, that's
because I just feel like through talking to them, I like come to see them as more three-dimensional, and maybe I'm like overly empathetic.
No, I get that. I mean, I can humanize. Yeah, it's easy to when you're face to face with somebody. It's like it's so much easier to humanize them. Although I wonder too. I feel like that's one of the main problems with straight men and straight women is that straight men don't humanize a woman's experience in the world and what we deal with. And like when the election happened and Trump won, I was really baffled, and I think it's still naive to be baffled maybe, that men didn't care that the person they voted for was a rapist. It's just so clearly, like by multiple people, and it's in the courts, it's in the documents, and that's just not. And I realized, oh yeah, you can't make a man care about women's interests when he's voting. I don't know how to sell that to men.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of really interesting research into sort of how people's embrace of gender stereotypes impacts their voting pattern and what they believe. And this is true for women too. It's true of people of all genders. Like the more you embrace stereotypes about masculinity and femininity, the more you tend to vote conservative. And in fact, the more you tend to disbelieve people who come forward about sexual violence. So like they've done studies that show that the more people embrace like stereotypes of masculinity, the more likely they were to vote for Trump in 2016 and in 2020, and the more likely they were to disbelieve people who came forward about Brett Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
And so all of this is very tied up, not just in like, men are this way, women are that way, but like, what do we believe about how men should be? And like women oftentimes can believe those stereotypes very much as well.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, internalized sexism is pretty rampant.
Hell of a drug.
Yeah.
You were talking a little bit about humanizing people when you're interviewing them. Was there ever a time when you considered maybe the right is correct, like about anti-choice? Maybe we're wrong and they're right. Has that ever crossed your mind, or is something you ever kind of tossed around
Played with?
your brain?
I mean, I've spent a lot of time around folks who oppose to abortion.
Sure.
And like, if you earnestly believe that a fetus is a baby, like that is a very powerful motivating belief. And I also think that that's a very personal one.
Yeah.
There isn't really like, sometimes people who are opposed to abortion will spread things that are not true, but like it is oftentimes a question of like religious belief or just like belief about philosophy, whether or not a fetus is a person or not. And so like, I don't know that I tend to think about it in ways that like, oh, this person's right, this person is wrong. It's more that like, I tend to think about, okay, what does this belief lead people to do? And what does it lead them? Yeah. What does it lead them to accept sometimes? Because like, what are you willing to endorse in service of this belief?
Right.
And does that endorsement actually align itself with these values that you say you have?
Yeah, and some people become just so glued to their values that they're not going to budge just out of stubbornness.
Or like, people, I think, like for Trump, for example, I think there's a lot of folks who are on the right who don't believe that Trump is like necessarily a good person, and they don't believe that he's a true believer in the anti-abortion cause. They don't think that he is really a good representative of Christianity, but because he advances their goals, they are willing to vote for him.
Right,
and so that's something I spend a lot of time thinking about, is like, how far are you willing to go, or what are you willing to sacrifice in service of a goal that you believe to be bigger? And like opposition to abortion, again, if you think a fetus is a baby, then you think a genocide is going on. And a lot of people would be willing to sacrifice a lot to stop that.
Sure. Yeah, and the idea of like babies dying, I completely get how that's like a traumatizing fact that you want to make sure doesn't happen. Was there any talk through your times at these anti-choice rallies about vasectomies? Because that's how a woman gets pregnant.
I can't say it's come up. I'm trying to remember if I talked to anybody.
Or anti-male masturbation. Like, do they talk about masturbation at all?
Not really. I mean, I think it's sort of like looped into like, don't have sex.
Have sexual
activity. Like don't watch porn. Like it's like all of that sexual energy should really be conserved until you meet your wife.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if I talked to many men for the book who got vasectomies. I do know that vasectomies and other forms of permanent contraception are up since Roe was overturned, and particularly among young people. And like both vasectomies and tubal ligations are up, but we do see that tubal ligations are up more than
That's
vasectomies.
when a woman, it's a version
which
of
is interesting because like that is more permanent and more invasive than a
right.
vasectomy, and yet it's still like on women to prevent the pregnancy.
Yeah. There was a couple of viral videos going around when Roe got overturned about, people going up to men that were anti-choice, asking them like, "What would you feel about a mandatory vasectomy until you're ready to have a baby?" And they were like, "What? No!" We're like, "Oh, it doesn't feel good when someone says what you should do with your body." Do you see the connection? And then they don't.
Yeah. Well, I think this sort of goes back oftentimes to this like whole belief system that gets made about sex, where it's like you should be having great sex, but only with your wife, and like once you're married to have children. And so I think that feeds into this reluctance to get a vasectomy. And also because there's, so much of ideas about masculinity are like based in the penis.
In your load.
Right, in your ability to procreate.
Yes.
Yeah. Wait, I had a question. What was I going to ask? Fuck. It left me. It was good.
Oh, okay.
I remember.
Well, I was like, we're at an hour, but I just want to make sure that we got everything on our list.
Yeah, is there anything else that you want to touch on from the book that like really surprised you, or was like a left turn that you didn't expect?
I don't think so. I mean,
or anything that like you learned that you're like, that makes me feel good about the direction. Like
anything that makes me, there was something positive that came out of the book, and I talk about this at the very end of the book. But so that young woman I mentioned who was developed early and then went through so much sexual violence, we talked actually twice, like about a year apart. And she was telling me the second time about her boyfriend and how in love she was with him. And, she had a partner who shared her nudes, multiple partners who shared her nudes without her consent. But then she felt empowered to be vulnerable and to share nudes again with her new boyfriend because she really felt like she could trust him. And more importantly, she felt that even if he betrayed her trust, even if he did share her nudes, like she had made that choice, that informed choice to do this.
So it was discernment instead of walls.
Yeah. And I felt that was really powerful. And there's a lot of research that actually shows that relationships between men and women, romantic relationships between men and women can lead to greater gender equity. Because when men see women, find women they love, they want them to succeed and they want them to do well and to flourish. And so seeing that in action with this young woman felt very powerful to me, to be like, there is hope here. People can come together and they can make a better future for themselves and then spread that future out to their community.
Yeah, that's amazing. And also I remember the question I wanted to ask about media literacy. So you've worked for a couple publications.
I have, yes.
Does your boss throughout the years over the publications that you've worked at all, like, have you ever felt like a piece you wanted to write was stifled by the person in charge?
No, I feel like I have gotten very lucky in that I've always had editors who, if anything, have really deepened my reporting and pushed me to go in different directions than I would have naturally thought about. I think one of the things that we're always trying to do in journalism is to, like, what is people's media literacy? Like, what do readers really know or think? And I think working at The Guardian has been really helpful in this way because it is an international paper. And so we oftentimes here in US media can take things for granted and not necessarily explain the context of certain political developments. But at The Guardian, we work to really explain that context because we assume that the readers are international or are not going to know something. And so being forced to spell out something about U.S. society can be really clarifying, and I can be like, "Oh, that is weird, actually." Yeah, and it is important for people to know that and not to take things for granted.
Yeah, and I know, like Corinne, you were talking to me about like Breitbart, which I've never read, but with her political podcast, she reads the spectrum of news. Obviously, they have a clear directory, so like if somebody at Breitbart is not going to be writing about sexual freedom, I would imagine. Have you met journalists?
Well,
along the way?
They would just be like, "This slut's gone rogue."
Yeah,
I mean, they use a lot more casual language than you would see in a more traditional news source.
You know what's surprising, actually, is I've seen a number of times my articles will get picked up by a right-wing news source.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they'll like tweak it.
Cherry pick?
Yeah, but they'll tweak it slightly, and then oftentimes I'm like, this is just plagiarism. Like, this is the same article. Like, wow. Aggregation is a thing that happens in the news. I'm not, I'm not gonna get mad about that, but like, you can't just take the whole article.
And do you have anything for young people listening about media literacy that you would just want them to be armed with, just knowledge to look out for?
I mean, I really hope that young people pay for news if they have the ability to do so. I think that the crisis of the journalism industry is not necessarily very well understood outside of it.
Right.
And there is like less and less money in journalism all the time. And so I think that creates worse journalism, which leads to a worse society because people don't know important information. Yeah. And so I really hope that young people pay for news or get their parents to pay for news if they can't afford to do so, because that's how you get better news.
Right. Okay. And it also adds to things like they need to print kind of like these clickbaity articles with ads attached to them because that's how they make money for their news source.
Yeah.
Like this celebrity used to be ugly and now they're hot or something like that. You're like, okay, well, why are you printing this? It's like, well, because unfortunately people are more excited about clicking on this article than one about climate change.
Yeah. But people do read about climate change. I'm always surprised by the degree to which people are really interested in that kind of stuff. It's just that there seems to not necessarily be the money to invest in the deep kind of investigative reporting that I do feel like people really appreciate and really enjoy.
And then with all the research you've done on sexuality, is there a future outlook you have? Is there a pattern that you see that you think in the next 5, 10, 15 years, this is going to be the mindset around sexuality? Do you have a prediction?
I feel like with the way that U.S. politics has gone in the last 10 years, I tried to not predict things anymore. Yeah. But I think the thing that if you are trying to discern the future of American sex and constraints around sex, politically, legally, et cetera, it is very important to look at state legislatures and look at what's getting passed on the state level. Because we saw with Roe v. Wade, the way that was overturned was by passing hundreds of abortion restrictions over time. And so if you were someone who cares about the direction and the freedoms of U.S. sex, look at what is going on in your own state legislature and act on it if you don't agree with it, because what happens at the state level is a laboratory for what's going to happen at the federal level.
Yeah.
And you set the stage years down the line for immense changes in U.S. life when you can change things in enough states. And I think people don't pay attention to state legislatures. They oftentimes just don't pay attention to things that don't affect them.
Yes,
but all of this stuff, to go back to the people who I was talking to who didn't believe that abortion restrictions would impact their lives, it does come and impact all of us eventually.
That's great.
Dun, dun, dun.
To be continued.
Love that. Perfect ending. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us today. If you want to pick up Carter's book while we're recording this in June, make sure to do that. We'll link it. Do you have a preferred way for them to purchase it, or just anywhere?
Buy it anywhere. If you want to buy it from your local bookshop, though, I wouldn't hate it.
Yes, that would be great.
Thank you so much for sitting down with us. This has been Guys We Fucked, the anti-slut shaming podcast. We'll talk to you next Friday.